When Mohawk Paper Company had to shut the Beckett Mill down in 2012 because of the economy and the steep decline in the use of our kinds of papers. When that happened, Tom O'Connor, the owner and president, telephoned me. He asked me if I and my son Guy would spend some time at the mill going through all the materials, the tons of records, artifacts, boxes, photos, albums, scrapbooks. He asked us if we would take some appropriate items for members of the Beckett family. Then he said he would like us to select something for him to have in his office in New York State. And then he said to Guy and to me, he said, use your own judgment in what happens to the rest of everything. Mohawk purchased Beckett in 2005. I will never forget that other phone call when Tom O'Connor called me and told me what was going to happen, that they were going to acquire the mill from International Paper, and I thought that was such good news. Tom was a good friend of mine, so was his father and his grandfather. Mohawk and Beckett had a lot in common. We were competitors, but we knew each other through industry meetings, and we became friends. Mohawk and Beckett had the same policy and philosophy of doing business, and we both had a national reputation for quality products. Tom was heartbroken when he had to close the mill. For 7 years, he'd given it his very best shot of keeping the mill operating and moving forward. But the economy and the decline in the use of fine papers forced him to take this action. My son Guy and his company were Mohawk's largest customers, and Tom and Guy were very close personal friends. My son Guy died last year, but he and I spent a number of days at the mill going through everything, and without Guy this would not have been possible. We tried to carry out Tom's request. At least 95% of everything we found ended up here at the Historic Society. I thought it was very important that Beckett's long and rich history be permanently protected, and this was a place for it to be. Fortunately, the Butler County Historic Society and Kathy Creighton, its director, agreed that Hamilton's oldest industry deserved to be recognized in such a way, and they accepted all of our many donations. Kathy Creighton has been fantastic in her support. I think she fell in love with the Beckett Paper Company too. She and her husband Ed have made so many trips to the mill. They discovered things that I didn't even know were there. Guy and I and the Creightons made many vans full of artifacts. We brought box after box after box of photo albums, scrapbooks, materials. It was Kathy who suggested we have this exhibit, and she has worked so hard, tirelessly and relentlessly in helping to make this possible. During recent months, the last months of last year, the early months of this year, I spent a lot of time here going through things, organizing and planning. It's been quite a challenge, a labor of love, where there have been so many things. Thanks to Kathy and her board, her staff, and her volunteers, we have this wonderful exhibit. I want to recognize and thank Shirley Hill, with whom I worked many years at Beckett. She helped me when we started working on this exhibit. And I have a new friend, Mike DeBye, who's not here today, but he needs to be recognized. Mike was doing a volunteer internship with the Historic Society, and Kathy put us together. She made the connection, and she said to Mike, I think you'd like to work on the Beckett exhibit. Well, he did like to. He was responsible for putting all the photographs in these displays. I would write out verbiage for signs, and Mike would make the signs. And he helped me in so many ways. So grateful to him. Also, I want to recognize three Beckett friends, Paul Hensley Jr., Chuck Holliday, and Bernie Winneman. They have made contributions. Many of the things you see here, they contributed to the exhibit, and I'm very grateful for that. As I worked on the exhibit, I was reminded how grateful I was that Beckett recognized and respected its long history. And there was a policy that was long there before I came. For generations, there was a policy of keeping and maintaining historic artifacts. Otherwise, we would never have this exhibit. I ran into a couple of surprises. I thought I'd seen everything at Beckett, but this wonderful pastel portrait of William Beckett, the founder, was unearthed. I had never seen that before. And we found some handwritten minutes of Beckett board meetings dating 1876. That was a year that the mill went from a partnership, a family partnership, into a corporation. So those were wonderful surprises. We found the volumes of the minutes in the big safe in the BOH warehouse area. As Kathy can tell you, this kind of historic treasury doesn't just happen, and it doesn't happen with many companies. So it's not too surprising that this is the largest exhibit in the history of the Butler County Historic Society. And while we were a small mill and not the largest employer in Hamilton by far, we were the oldest company, dating back to 1848, and I think we were probably as involved in the community as any company of any size in the history of the city. I spent 32 years of my life at Beckett, actually a little bit more than that. I worked 2 summers in college in the maintenance department, and I spent a year's training program at the mill before I joined an advertising agency. And I used to remind the personnel department that I had those years of service. They wouldn't buy into it. They said 32 years. So it was 32 years officially, and good years. I can tell you that putting this exhibit together has been an emotional roller coaster. It has brought back laughs and tears. I was always so proud to be a part of Beckett, to be an employee, and I think most people felt that way. Small as Beckett was, we stood out. We were a leader in the paper industry. We were well known for our products. We made hundreds of different colors and finishes. We had unique products. We started the cover paper industry. The first cover paper in the industry was Buckeye Cover in 1894. And in 1938, we introduced Beckett Brilliant Opaque. It was the first premium printing paper in the industry. In 1954, we introduced Beckett High White. It was the first fluorescent white paper in the industry. And we were one of the very first paper mills to advertise nationally. You can see many of our samples over here. Some of them started right after the Civil War. Here at home, I think we were like a large family. We worked hard, but we had some fun along the way. We had many get-togethers, picnics, parties. We sponsored a lot of sport teams. We had our own publication, Life at Beckett's, every month. We even had our own cookbooks and our own chapel. We were renowned for high-quality products, but I've always felt that our most important products were Beckett people, Beckett employees. For generations, we had hardworking, talented, loyal, and dedicated employees, and I'm so grateful for that. Again, I want to thank all the Beckett people for being here today, and for our community friends And now I'm going to turn the podium over to my good friend, Kathy Creighton, without whose help we would not have this exhibit.
Called Too Many Years Living with a Music Major Sister, that when we would get into discussions, we both learned how to use our voices very loudly. I just want to make some comments as to how this exhibit came together. Like Dave said, he took us over, my husband and I, the first day with the expressed purpose of picking up the desk. And he said, I need a truck to get the desk out of here. And I said, okay, we'll get the desk. I won't tell you what it looked like. It was filthy. It was horrendous. My husband is a wizard at bringing back antiques. He spent hours working on the desk to restore it to what it looks like today. And as we're walking through, I think the one person that Dave failed to mention was Jeff Bodner. He was the person that was in charge of doing the original scrapping at the factory. Thank heavens he was raised by a mother who was a volunteer at a New England Historical Society. And he basically gave us carte blanche to go in and take whatever we want. And I jokingly tell people when they say, how did you get this stuff? I said, never give me a crowbar. Because the very first thing after we got the desk that I took was the sign out there that we're all asking you to sign. I came in, we came around the corner, it was there in the mill, and I said, this is what Beckett is about. And I looked at Jeff and I said, have you got a crowbar? And he said, sure. That was the first piece I took because I said, this tells the whole story. The next piece we took is, I hope you all noticed the door off the safe. And as Bernie tells me, he used to hide in that office, right? I pay attention when you guys go through and tell me stories. And this, when Dave said things that he didn't know about that safe. He looked at that safe door and he said, where did that come from? Well, that was in the basement. Let me tell you our adventures of moving the artifacts out of here. The first thing the scrappers did was pulled all the electrical wiring out of the plant. So we are having to do our great scavenger hunt with flashlights. We have no elevators, and so anything we found was having to be carried all the way out to the main shipping area there. And sometimes, I mean, we're talking, what, 2 city blocks to cart this stuff out? I looked at my husband and I said, gee, I'd really like to have that safe door because it says both Mosler and Beckett Paper on it. If you don't tell me no, you certainly don't tell my husband no. And Dave and I walked on to look at other things. And the next thing I know, here comes my husband driving a forklift with the door on the forklift. Thank goodness there was a ramp from the basement. Otherwise, we'd have never gotten it. And I said, how did you get that off? He said, don't ask. He goes out, drops it in the bed of our pickup truck. And I said, how are we going to unload it at the Historical Society? And he looks at me with dead seriousness and says, gravity. And we brought it on 2 furniture movers, got it that far, and it hasn't moved since it came in from the factory. They kind of gave us a strange look when we took it because it could have been scrapped. But Jeff looked the other way. He said, I know it's going to the Historical Society. You're not going to scrap it. So he says, go ahead. It basically was a labor of love. Like Dave said, I really feel like I became a member of the Beckett family, working on this, seeing where you all worked, seeing the pictures, the wall of history that so many of these pictures came from literally was still on the walls, and we took them down. Bernie's been telling me stories about what was left, as he was the last man standing at Beckett, telling me stories of how he was taking items out. The 2 pictures right there in front of Chuck was one of the last things he took out of Beckett, and he brought them back in to be reunited with the rest of the stuff. A story on the chapel. I did not know there was a chapel at Beckett, and I thought that was so cool. And my crowbar, of course, took the door off the hinges. We pried the bulletin board off the wall, and it still, those of you that looked at it, still has the prayer requests from the last day that Beckett was open that was on there. And I was upset because Dave says we need to get the stained glass window. We walked in there and the stained glass window was gone. Well, right after this exhibit opened, man by the name of, Dave Porter? Dave Porter came in from northern Kentucky. I was hoping he was gonna be here today. And he said, my dad's the one that built the chapel.
Yep.
And so he took it up there, and one of the people, the request for prayers, was his wife that's on the prayer board. And so there's a picture of him up here standing by the chapel door. And I said to him, I said, we're really upset. I said, Dave was upset that we couldn't find the chapel, the window was gone. He said, you tell Dave not to worry about it, it's safe. He says, my family has it. And so they have it. They've told me that when they've decided that it needs a new home, it will be coming here to join the rest of the Beckett exhibit. So we had a good time as you went through. If you notice, the safety sign is laying up in the one window. I won't tell you how many cases of paper that we hand carried from the 3rd floor down through 2 city blocks, down the staircase. My husband finally said, enough's enough. But I probably got enough Beckett paper here for the next 20 years. It was just an experience for us. We felt like we were part of the company and could feel the love that went into this place. And if you really start getting lonely for the good old times, 4 of the tables from your break room is part of the exhibit. The other 4 are up at the Oxford Museum Association, Doty Farmstead, as is all 50 of your blue chairs that you used to sit in. They're all up at the Oxford Museum Association. So I just want to thank you all for coming today. And like I told Dave, and he said, I said, the name of this exhibit needs to be Beckett, more than a business, a family. And the more we got into it, you are definitely a family. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Kathy.
Dave, I'll turn it back over to you.
I wish we'd had a lot of photographs of Ed and Kathy transporting things. I mean, it could weigh 1,000 pounds or 10 pounds. They're scavengers. And thank goodness they were, you know. And going back, thank God that Tom O'Connor had an appreciation for what we were, because a lot of companies have just closed it up and it would all disappeared. But he gave us that opportunity, and then the liquidator, Jeff, Kathy mentioned, had an appreciation, and he let us in there too. So it's certainly been a labor of love. When you leave, there are 2 things you should take with you. I mentioned we had a Beckett cookbook. We actually had 2 editions, and these are available in this 125th anniversary booklet put out in 1973. It contains a lot of history of the mill. Those are available for each of you in the hallway. Be sure to take them. And a good friend of the museum and a good friend of Hamilton, historian Carl Ruther, has done something very special. And Carl, would you come up and explain?
I can say it from here.
Okay.
I just was so impressed that I couldn't resist